Hello, loves. So welcome back to another episode of Becoming. I'm one of your hosts, Emme. We are the Syndicate, and today we're going to talk to you about the fabric of life, or what you can do, what things and pieces, actionable things you can do to create your life, a life that you actually want to live, where you wake up feeling fulfilled and you go to bed the same way. One of the things that I think we often do is we get busy trying to build a life and we hadn't sat down to plan it. We don't know what we really do believe is and is not possible for us. And a rule of thumb, I tell people this all the time, you can't create what you don't believe in.
Right.
Something inside of you will always block you from actually possessing it because you don't believe in it. And so a lot of people, when they have been through really deep, dark bouts of depression, bipolar disorder, they're going through, sadness, death in the family, divorce, whatever, they can feel like that kind of joy isn't something that's tangible, but it is, and we're going to tell you how to get it today.
I'm glad you brought up depression because you made me think about how life moves in cycles, and how one of the cycles is the depressed cycle, which is not necessarily a place that you want to live at, but it is a necessary stage because you have to get rid of what is in the way for new creation or what no longer benefits you in order to move forward to what does. So a lot of times people get in that depression cycle and it kind of like throws them off, and because it doesn't feel great. But what it is I kind of also refer to it as the dishwashing cycle, because like if you think about everything works in cycles, like you have to clean the dishes in order to use them again. So we go through those stages and we have to like look at them and realize that they're here for a reason and not necessarily because I did something just so wrong. So
Right.
Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah, and that's a valid point. I had never thought about depression like that. When I think of depression, I generally think of something that I can maybe help someone get through, and I think of getting through it more so than really, not so much as not dealing with what's going on, but in dealing with it in a way that gets you out of it. I always say I don't like to linger in low places long, but you make a valid point about that depression cycle and that stage being a moment where we can begin to rebuild a new phase, in our lives.
I agree, and I'm glad that you, Tasha and Nicole, brought up the word cycle, because it is a cycle. And as with anything, what goes up must come down. And when we swing to the left in depression, and then it's got to come back out. And acknowledging that swing to the depression and understanding that there is something there that I can use from this, and that I'm not going to stay there, and it is going to come back out to the positive and to the, not positive, that's not the word I'm looking for, but more of a joyful time.
Yeah.
And we have to have both so that we can recognize and appreciate both. If we're happy all the time, we're not going to really appreciate that.
That's
So-
true. That is true.
And when you say that swing, you're talking about that pendulum swing, that, there are going to be moments, ebbs and flows, moments where things are going to be in our favor, and then other moments, well, it will feel like it's out of our favor. And then what do we make of when that pendulum swings away from us? And that goes back to what Nicole was saying about understanding that this is a point and a place to begin rebuilding and to begin moving into a new phase within your life.
Absolutely.
I think a big part of that too is taking a moment to sit with whatever that may be, right? Whether it's depression, whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, whether it's anger, because all those things always tell us something within ourselves. And a lot of times it's just not taking the time, right? To sit with ourselves and figure out what is it that's actually telling you that we have to work on. Because doing our own work is hard.
It is.
It's hard, and I think that's the thing. And a lot of times there's even guilt and shame that comes with when you look inward. That what you find people feel really shameful about, and it's like, that's okay. It is what it is, right? It's just, but you use that to go to where you would like your life to be, to actually transmute that, to change that, and that you can rewrite that story. And so I think it's a big piece of it is also just being in tune and looking in for what those things are actually activating within us.
Absolutely.
And while my syndicate sisters are on point and really putting the thing out there as far as depression is concerned, I do want to acknowledge that there are forms of depression that unfortunately we cannot manage on ourselves. And I come from a background of both my mother and father suffered from manic depression and mental illness. And that's something that we are also carrying around too. We're afraid to ask for the help that we need.
Right.
So sometimes it is definitely manageable, and definitely that we have to just kind of look at what we're dealing with to kind of let the pendulum swing, as Sonia said, to the other side. But when you find yourself in a place where you literally cannot get up off of the couch, you cannot get up out of the bed, you cannot do the things that would normally be gratifying to you, or you can't find any of the joy, there absolutely is no, there's no problem with getting help. There is no shame with getting help, and that's another thing that we're talking about too, is just getting rid of the shame, period, associated with everything. The shame just does not serve us. And going to whomever you can, calling the hotlines that are out there to serve specifically, and just letting people help you, help yourself. So
I agree.
Right, and I'm glad that Bass brought that up, because one of the things that people have trouble with is the help. Will I be a burden to someone else? How do I ask for help? And sometimes what plays a role is the role that you have in life. Like, I am the helper, then who helps me? And a lot of people struggle with that. But that does, to the point of what this particular show is about establishing things within our lives that actually, help us maintain, that helps us, that nourishes us, that where we grow. And she brought up a valid point, Bast, regarding help. It's okay to seek therapy, and that can be part of what you do as you begin to work on your life. We talked about, Nicole, the mantras, Do you want to explain a little bit more about mantras?
Yeah, so I'd love to explain about mantras, because I love mantras, but I do look at mantras. So there is a difference between a mantra and an affirmation. So with a mantra, normally when you're reciting a mantra, and there's different number of times that you can recite the mantra. To do a full set of a mantra would be 108 rounds, and there's specific reasons too, but you can do mantra for maybe 33 rounds. I usually do them in master numbers of 11, 22, 33 and going up. But when you're doing a mantra, the most interesting thing about the mantra is it's actually the energy that's underneath the mantra that is changing everything. So when you're doing a mantra, you're repeatedly reciting specific verbiage, okay? So the older that the language that you recite the mantra in, the more powerful that the vibrational change is. So when you're reciting the mantra, you're changing your vibration. So if you are in a space of depression, Om Mani Padme Hum is one of my favorite mantras. Like, it just changes everything. Om Mani Padme Hum, like, can change like the whole vibration of the room. So when you're reciting that mantra and you're reciting it in its ancient language, you're getting like a more powerful vibration than if you were just saying the same thing that it means in a more like an English language, because English, is the new kid on the block, and so it doesn't carry the same weight. But repetitively repeating those mantras actually makes a clicking noise with your tongue that sends the vibrations upwards. So you're sending the vibrations to your higher chakras, and you're actually beginning to align yourself into a new and more, I hate to use the word positive too, because positive and negative is is a little bit different than we understand, but it puts yourself in a higher vibration of a space of receptivity and clarity, and it helps you to align with yourself. And then you can actually use the mala beads to help you count. And I know that Sonia, that you make mala beads, so maybe you can explain a little bit about those.
Well, when I make the malas, I almost feel like the beads come alive in my hands, and it's an act of, I want to say, worship or prayer as I'm making them, because it's forcing me to be mindful of what it is I'm doing, and each gemstone will have its own properties. And so as I'm making them, I'm absorbing and increasing or lifting or taking in or giving out, if it's for someone else. whatever those properties are. I'd also like to go back to, Donnie, what you said about the depression. I think also acknowledging, we've all heard the term, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right.
The secrets don't get anything.
Right.
And so acknowledging that depression and not wallowing in it, but ripping that scab off, ripping the blanket off, opening the blinds, letting people know that it's there, but then taking some positive steps, having an accountability partner, not someone that you can call up and word vomit the same problems over and over and over again, but having someone who is in a higher vibration than you are, a mentor, someone that you look up to, they can help bring you from that lower vibration up to that higher vibration and encourage you to get that treatment. Growing up in the church, it was shameful and sinful to be depressed because Christians had joy all the time. So there was a lot of secret depression and just it was a mess. So acknowledging it and owning it and saying, yes, this is what I'm struggling with right now, and this is, help me find some steps that I can take to get out of it, using the mantras, deciding that I'm not going to stay here, I'm going to choose something else to do, because once you make a decision, then you can move forward. If you don't make a decision, you don't know what you're doing.
You can linger there.
Absolutely. So
one of the things that all of you guys have brought up, and especially when you were talking about a depression, Donnie, when you were saying that there's a depression that sometimes you need help with, and each of you have kind of touched on something. One of the things that I attempt to show people who do come to me in a depressed state is that doesn't ever feel like a choice, but it is. I was chronically depressed from childhood, but I was born into dysfunction that was quite heavy. A lot of shooting and stabbing and fighting and drugging and drinking around me since I was born. And my nerves were bad at 2. You know what I mean? So by the time I started school, people would always try to get my grandmother and my mom to put me on medication because I literally would shake a lot. And I would chew my tongue. I had a lot of traumatic things that happened, and it would play out in those small things. But my parents refused to medicate me. And so because they refused, when I got older, I refused. But I did get tired of it. And when I first started dealing with my own depression, the first thing I realized is it come from somewhere, and I'm choosing to keep identifying with whatever the source is. So people who have been, like in my case, sexually abused, it comes from a real place. It's not something you can say, oh, just get over it, because it's not that simple. You carry this, like Ty was saying, this shame and the guilt and this whole lack of worth. So for me personally, it started setting up disease in my body. I had heart disease, Graves' disease, then lupus, and then epilepsy. It was like my body was literally imploding on itself. And when I first started down this path, the very first thing that came up is, what do you feel about yourself? Well, I've tried to kill myself a lot of times. I don't want to be here. I don't like this life. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Forget it. I'm done. You know what I mean? But that wasn't the answer, so I had to find another one. And the thing was for me, the primary thing for me was, or the most actionable thing I can give for you guys to do as well, was that I had to acknowledge that it did happen. And me sitting around feeling sad, me feeling like it was unfair, and all of the feeling that I was doing was not changing the fact that I was allowing a thing that happened, blah, 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 1988, to control what was going on in blah, 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 1999. At some point, when do I stop victimizing myself by letting that thing live on inside of me and determine how I'm going to feel about myself, you know?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why, like I said, I always tell people I don't linger in low places long. That doesn't mean that I don't experience, the valleys. I still experience the valleys. But to Donnie's point where she was saying that she has things that are in her family or whatever, I've had enough in my family that I see where the lingering has gotten them. My own mother, passed from this realm. in a depressed state, just in a state of misery because of the traumas and stuff and the unaddressed issues. And if you linger too long, you can begin to even tell yourself a worse story.
Right.
One of her issues was she was unable to even see herself as worthy of the recovery.
Wow.
So she didn't even try. And so we tried for her. We tried talking, as much as you can do for a family member that you love and stuff. We tried, but it's, she had something deep within where she did not see herself worthy of the recovery, almost like she told herself, I don't deserve, the happiness,
Wow.
So she is one of the very reasons why I don't linger in low places long. I allow myself to address it. I'll call a friend, you know what I'm saying? I've called Donnie, I've called Emme, I'll call a friend, get it off my chest, we talk about it, address it, and then again, I begin to incorporate things that will help me process this so that I am not holding on to this particular energy and the source of the depression.
Do understand though, when you are going through that process, as Tasha was talking about, identifying it and pulling yourself out of it actively, that it is not an overnight thing.
Right.
And that you need to give yourself that space, that it is not going to be overnight. Do not have that expectation. As a matter of fact, put all those expectations away and simply deal with what you are, what you're doing. I can definitely just identify with each one of your perspectives, especially you, Tasha, because both of us, coming from parents with mental illness, and my mother died in a similar fashion. With that said, though, so I learned a lot from it. I know that when my sister and I talk about it, we identify that we are susceptible to these things, and that we have our different parameters that we have to deal with. My sister may have to deal with her parameters a little bit differently than I do mine. But one thing that I believe Sonia said too is that identification is key. Identifying that is the biggest elephant in the room. Is I'm talking about the elephant in the room. A lot of people are denying those things. And when I tell you that they're walking around because depression is seen as a weakness.
It is.
And and no one wants to be weak.
Right.
But it's not about being weak. It's simply about identifying what does not serve you in your life, as Ty mentioned earlier, and reckoning with it, and then going forward one day at a time.
What are some things that we can incorporate, that people can incorporate on a daily basis to begin to address those issues, to begin to work on their vibrations? I know we talked about mantras and the mala beads, but what are some additional things that you ladies would recommend to assist people in forward movement?
I would say exercise.
Yeah, that's a good one. You're
And
right.
She hit the hard one first.
I had to laugh at that because I was like anti-exercise for most of my adult life. However, I had reached a moment where there was absolutely nothing that I could do but to get on a treadmill and work it out. And it's a simple getting out in fresh air and actually walking. Those endorphins,
that's true,
are some real. And I was going to add one more little thing too. Little things like doing things in the kitchen, which goes into mindfulness. Like if you're making yourself a sandwich, really get into that sandwich and really focus on every little piece of additives that you're putting in that sandwich. This lettuce is going to be the best lettuce that you're going to make. And this tomato is delicious. And all of these things to make up the best sandwich. It's so funny how those intentions
Yeah.
can
Exactly.
really make that sandwich taste like the best sandwich in the world, and it does something for your psyche
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and coping.
Good idea.
Also self-talk. How are you talking to yourself?
That.
Yeah.
That's been a battle that I have really had to put the reins on because taking pictures, we talked about selfies, Tasha, earlier tonight, and I was like, oh. and then when you called and you were like, we're going to be on the Syndicate, we're going to tape, I was like, okay, it's okay, you know, and just talking to yourself in the mirror. You don't have to announce every little flaw you see. Appreciate the good things. Appreciate the good things. You know, you're not lazy because you slept until 8.
Right.
You're not, you know, just one step at a time. Be appreciative of yourself and making self-honoring decisions like Ty mentioned. Very, very important. It's not selfish to make a self-honoring decision. You're not being prideful when you tell yourself you look good today.
Right.
And I love mindfulness, right? It's something that I always advocate, educate on. And so like you were saying, Donnie, and with mindfulness and what you were explaining, that's a great way to connect to it. So have you ever heard the quote, like, depression is when we're focused on the past, anxiety is when we're focused on the future, right? The things we can't manage and control. So mindfulness is about connecting us to this present moment.
Right. That's right.
And so activity that's very similar that I do, or even I talk to people about doing, is utilizing your senses during mindfulness. So you can actually engage those with, if you need to be back connected or grounded in this present moment, what do you actually see? What do you feel physically in this moment? What are the things that you are tasting sensationally wise? Like using your actual physical senses to bring you back to the present moment and to ground and center you actually helps a lot as well as far as bringing you into this moment too.
I love that.
So I have a tip. So, but I wanted to add one thing. So what Donnie was saying about about the depression and about identifying it, and I think Sonia said it as well. So when I worked in corporate America, I was always referred to as the silent runner. That was the person who just got the job done and didn't make a big deal, because we always had people who were, look at me, that was me, give me my credit, give me my credit. But what I've learned through life is I've been a silent runner, and I've been through treatment in a facility for depression as a teenager. Like, I was actually admitted into the facility, had to take the medication, do the different treatments. But as I was, growing and learning, I found that one of the easiest ways for me was the identification of what is the problem, why am I feeling like this? And the easiest way for me that I found, and the reason why I teach yoga, is because I found it on the mat. So the thing that's really good about going into yoga, especially when you're depressed, because yoga literally brought me out of a depression, was that when you go into yoga, like, first of all, you can't focus on anything but self, because you're trying to hold poses that are, some can be uncomfortable or unfamiliar. And the great thing about yoga is it's a transition into meditation, because while you're only focused on holding this pose, you have no choice but to be internal. So it's an actual leeway into meditation, and it literally pulled me out of a really deep depression. It helped me get through a lot of different things. So I would say try yoga. If you have a problem with meditation, use it as a transition as well. Anytime you're doing any type of energy movements, Tai Chi, dancing, depression is an energy. You got to move it around. You got to shake it up. So you got to do something.
So, guys, today we want to make sure that you understand that it's your choice, your life, your choice, and it's up to you to find things that work for you, whatever they look like. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Becoming, and we have many more coming for you soon. We are
The Syndicate.